Good morning, everyone. Let's begin the session with Omkaram, followed by Annava Mantram. Om. 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 Annava Mantram. Natvaham kamaye ratyam nasvargam napurnabhavam kamaye dukkataptanam praninamurtinashanam. A warm and heartfelt welcome to all the participants of the NMVP MedCatish Foundation, the Zero or Rapid Revision Series. Today our subject is anatomy. The topic is neuroanatomy. Topics to be covered are medulla, specialized surface, functional areas of the brain, and circle of Willis. It is our privilege to have Dr. Parmala Madam with us today. We sincerely thank you for your graciously accepting our invitation, Madam. With great respect, I now request Dr. Parmala Madam to kindly take over the session and guide us with our valuable insights, Madam.
So, very good morning to all of you. Today we are going to discuss 3 topics. I'll be going in a superficial manner, in a simple manner to the possible extent. Because neuroanatomy is an extensive subject, it is complex. So, I don't want to integrate all the topics, but I will be going topic wise only. Because if it's go on integrating means it will be so lengthy and confusing. So, let us start with the 3 topics which we have decided to discuss. That is, first one is TS of medulla at the level of pyramidal decussation. So the first topic is TS of medulla. So for that, just in a simple manner, the external features of the medulla. This part which we are seeing here, this one is medulla, and it is also called with a short name called bulb because of its appearance. Then the external features we see in 2 views. This is anterior view and behind we have a posterior view. So the anterior view of the medulla presents with a median fissure, which is extension of the median fissure of the spinal cord. On either side of this fissure, we have 2 bulges called as pyramids. These pyramids are formed by the aggregation of or compacted corticospinal fibers. The pyramid is nothing but the condensed pyramidal tract. Then lateral to the pyramid is, this bulge is called as olive, and further lateral is called inferior cerebellar peduncle. Here you are able to see in this picture where my cursor is there, this is pyramid, this is olive, and this part is inferior cerebellar peduncle. There are sulci separating these things. Pyramid and olive are separated by anterolateral sulcus. Olive and inferior cerebellar peduncle are separated by posterolateral sulcus. So this is how the medulla looks. The lower end of the medulla, if you can observe, the pyramid is waning or the size of the pyramid is reducing because of the decussation of these fibers that is happening at the lower end of pyramid. And at this level, if you observe, you cannot differentiate the spinal cord below from the medulla above. So the lower end of the medulla, where the pyramidal decussation occurs, is externally and internally also similar to spinal cord. That is a basic point which you have to remember. This is how it looks in the dissected specimen. These are pyramids, this is olive, and this is inferior cerebellar peduncle. This is a median fissure, anterolateral sulcus, and this sulcus is posterolateral sulcus. As I was mentioning, this is the lower end of the pyramids. At the lower end of pyramids, the decussation happens and it is similar to the spinal cord. So section at the level of pyramidal decussation, the section will be similar to TS of spinal cord. This is what we have to remember. Another important point for your understanding purpose I am telling. Look at here, this lower part is spinal cord in which the central canal is centrally located. In this place, the central canal is in the middle. Whereas if you move from spinal cord to medulla, there will be shift of this central canal dorsally. In this section at the level of pyramidal decussation, slightly posterior to the central canal of spinal cord. In the upper section, further dorsal. That means the medulla is read under 3 sections. The lowermost section is called section at the level of pyramidal decussation. The intermediate section is called as sensory decussation section. and the topmost section will be called section at the level of olive. So here, if you see from below upwards, central canal is slightly dorsal in the lower section. In the intermediate section, it is more dorsal. And in the upper section, there is no central canal. Instead, the posterior surface of the medulla, this is the posterior surface of medulla, forms the floor of the fourth ventricle. This is fourth ventricle. So this is posterior surface of pons, and this is all medulla, upper part of medulla. And this is the posterior surface of medulla, which becomes the floor of the fourth ventricle. So you have a central canal in the lower section and in the middle section, whereas in the upper section there is no central canal. All the cranial nerve nuclei will be dispersed or pushed towards the posterior aspect of the medulla. These are the basic things which you have to remember to understand the sections of medulla. This is a posterior view. Why I want to tell the posterior view means, in order to understand the section, you need to have a little bit idea about the external features, so that internally what is present you can understand. So this is a section which is showing the posterior view. This is posterior median sulcus, which is nothing but the cranial extension of posterior median sulcus of spinal cord. So on either side of this, you are able to see fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus. This is the section we are going to study, section at the level of pyramidal decussation, the lowermost section. You will be seeing fasciculus gracilis medially, fasciculus cuneatus laterally. These are the bulges. If you move upwards, this is section at the level of middle part, you are seeing a bulge called as gracile tubercle and cuneate tubercle. These two tubercles have nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus inside in the section. This is section at the level of sensory decussation, whereas here on the dorsal aspect, you are seeing fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Clear? Right. With this introduction, this is how they appear. Here you are able to see the bulges, and we are at this level. We are going to see the section at this level, fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Right. So this is what I have told you, the lower part and the upper part. What is the difference? In the lower part, the central canal is just like the location in the spinal cord. In the upper part, central canal widens and further moves dorsally, and in the upper part, it forms the floor of the fourth ventricle. Right. So another small introductory point I would like to start with, so that it will be easy for us to go through the section. So here I am projecting one nucleus. What is that nucleus? It is a nucleus of trigeminal nerve. What is trigeminal nerve? The trigeminal nerve is a sensory nerve for the head and neck region. It is a major sensory nerve for head and neck region. So all the sensations of the head and neck will go to the trigeminal nerve nucleus, which is extensively present in the brainstem. The brainstem consists of midbrain, pons, and medulla. All the information that is received from the trigeminal nerve, either it is ophthalmic division, maxillary division, or mandibular division, all these fibers will come and they will relay in a sensory nucleus. But this sensory nucleus is of three kinds: mesencephalic nucleus of midbrain, principal sensory nucleus of pons, and spinal nucleus of the medulla. Why three nuclei are there and why are they extensively present? Because we have three types of sensations. General touch sensation. The general touch sensation from any division of trigeminal nerve will reach the pons and they get relayed in the principal sensory nucleus. We have second sensation, that is pain temperature. So pain temperature from any of these three areas, ophthalmic, maxillary, will go to the spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve, which is located in the medulla. In the same way, proprioceptive information from any of these, muscle and joint position sense from any of these regions, will go and relay in the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve. This is the reason why we have three nuclei. This is for proprioceptive information, this is for general touch sensation, and this is for pain temperature. That is the reason why we have three nuclei. All are nuclei of trigeminal nerve, and they relay in these nuclei depending upon the sensation that is being received from head and neck region. Hope I am clear. So when we are going to the medulla section, so you have to remember the lowermost section. This is the only cranial nerve nucleus that we see in the lowermost section of the medulla. But if you move to the middle and upper sections of medulla, we will be seeing the nuclei of the last cranial nerves, that is 9, 10, 11, 12. These cranial nerves will be emerging If you want, I'll show you the previous one also. One second. The first image I want to show you again. Yes. So if you see here, in the anterolateral sulcus, the 12th cranial nerve, rootlets of 12th cranial nerve emerge. That means the nucleus is somewhere inside the medulla. If you see the posterolateral sulcus, here from above downwards, 9, 10 and 11th cranial nerve, 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve emerge from the posterolateral sulcus. That means the nuclei of these cranial nerves are located inside the medulla. But these nuclei, 9, 10, 11, 12 nuclei will be related to the upper and middle parts of the medulla. Whereas in the lower part, as I have mentioned, you see only the spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. So with this introduction, we are going into the section of medulla at the level of pyramidal decussation. This is an image from Vishram Singh textbook, which is simple for you to understand. You have to practice this diagram first, and while practicing, you have to understand whatever you have to write in relation to this section. So as I have mentioned earlier, if you see this section, it is appearing similar to spinal cord. Try to identify the dissimilarities first, and then we will learn about the section. What are the dissimilarities normally? The spinal cord has a posterior horn and an anterior horn. But here we are seeing two extensions from the central gray matter towards the posterior horn. Two extensions. So the central gray matter is extending posteriorly as two more projections. Okay. So they are nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. This is one peculiarity. And other peculiarity we are seeing here is the white matter fibers from the anterior aspect, that is from the pyramids, is decussating dorsolaterally and resulting in the formation of the tract called lateral corticospinal tract. So these are the two major things that you have to remember while writing the section at the level of pyramidal decussation, which is a very, very important section. Okay. Now this is a hand-drawn diagram which will help you to draw. That's why I have drawn here. Right. So what are the things which you have to write in TS of medulla at the level of pyramidal decussation? This is the first section of medulla, which is located at the lower end of medulla. What is its specialty? It closely resembles the spinal cord, right? So what you have to write for this section after drawing the diagram? You have to write only two headings. What is the gray matter in this section? What is the white matter? So describe the gray matter and white matter under separate headings to complete the matter that you have to write. So here if you observe, I'll tell in brief and then I'll show you the slide. So observe the gray matter. What are the points you have to mention about the gray matter? The gray matter at this section presents with a posterior horn, the end of which bulges to form spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. I have written here SP nucleus of trigeminal nerve. As I have mentioned, this is the only cranial nerve nuclei we see in this section. So once again, the posterior horn bulges at its tip to present with a nucleus called spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. This is the first thing. Then the central gray matter extends posteriorly, medial to this posterior horn, to present with a nucleus called nucleus gracilis medially and nucleus cuneatus laterally. Clear? So this is about central gray matter extension. Then come to the anterior horn. The anterior horn here is detached from rest of the gray matter by the decussating corticospinal fibers. So this is detached. But it presents with nuclei. What nuclei are seen here? The nuclei seen here are supraspinal axillary nucleus. Axillary nerve nucleus will be seen here. And another one, immediately below the section of the medulla, we have spinal cord, isn't it? So spinal cord, first spinal segment is C1. So just above the C1, we are here seeing the supranucleus. That means just above C1, you will also be, you don't have a clear-cut demarcation between lower end of medulla, upper end of spinal cord. So whatever you see in the first section of spinal cord will also be seen in the lowermost section of medulla. That's what I mean. Okay. Spinal accessory nerve means it is a spinal component of axillary nerve. It has nuclei. Axillary nerve nuclei will be there in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 segments. First 5 segments of spinal cord, C1 to C5. Okay. So just above the C1, we are here at just above the C1, first segment of spinal cord. So here we will be seeing spinal axillary nucleus and C1 nucleus. So those two are present here. So this is about the gray matter. Okay, that's all. Here I have drawn reticular formation and some dots I have kept. So these are called reticular nuclei. That's it too high for your level. So you need not mention also, it is okay. So posterior horn, spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve, extension of central gray matter, nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. Detached anterior horn has spinal axillary nucleus and supranucleus of C1, first cervical nerve. So this is about gray matter. Then what about the white matter? The white matter consists of posterior part, lateral part and anterior part. Posterior part, lateral part and anterior part. What about the posterior part of the white matter? It consists of fasciculus gracilis. I have shown you when I have shown the external features of the medulla. So the fasciculus gracilis, which is going to relay in this nucleus if you move to the upper section. So here you need not mention all those things. Opposite to the nucleus gracilis, you have fasciculus gracilis. Opposite to nucleus cuneatus, you have fasciculus cuneatus. And opposite to spinal nucleus, you have spinal tract of trigeminal nerve. Is that clear? So this region which we have described is posterior part or posterior white column. The posterior white column presents with fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus and spinal tract of trigeminal nerve. Coming to the lateral part of the white matter or lateral white column presents with anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts. Anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts, lateral spinothalamic tract and reticular formation. These things are exactly same in the spinal cord also. Just like the lateral white column of the spinal cord, here also we have anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts, lateral spinothalamic tract and reticular formation. In addition, the newly formed lateral corticospinal tract also is formed in the lateral white column. This is about lateral white column. Then coming to the anterior part. Here, the bulges which we are seeing are pyramids. The lower end of the pyramids, the pyramidal tract fibers, sweep dorsally. Very, very important word I am saying. The fibers of the pyramidal tract, they sweep dorsally and laterally because they are the most anterior fibers. They can't decussate in the air, isn't it? So they will be decussating back. They decussate dorsally and laterally. The fibers of the pyramidal tract, they decussate or sweep dorsolaterally, resulting in the formation of lateral corticospinal tract. How much of the fibers will decussate? It is almost 70% of the fibers will decussate. The undecussated fibers continue down as anterior corticospinal tract. Is that clear? This is the most important point that you have to mention in this section. The fibers of the pyramidal tract sweep dorsolaterally, detaching the anterior horn from the rest of the gray matter, and they form the lateral corticospinal tract in the lateral white column. The undecussated fibers continue as anterior corticospinal tract. So I'll project the slide for you. Now look at here, the gray matter, posterior horn, tip is swollen, spinal nucleus. What is it actually? It is the extension of the substantia gelatinous of Rolando. You can write it, or just for knowledge sake, you can mention. That's why I have kept it in bracket. Central gray matter bulges posteriorly. Nucleus gracilis medial, nucleus cuneatus lateral. Then ventral horn or anterior horn is detached by the fibers of decussating pyramidal tract. What does it present? It has spinal nucleus of accessory nerve. It is an extension of the spinal nucleus of accessory nerve and supraspinal nucleus of C1 spinal nerve. Okay. So accessory nerve and C1 spinal nerve are seen in the first segment, C1 segment of spinal cord. The same will be seen in the lower section of the medulla. Okay. Then white matter. The most important factor in the white matter is the decussation of the pyramidal tracts. The pyramids contain corticospinal fibers. They run initially vertically downwards. At this point, okay, in the anterior white column they are present. Then how do they decussate? At the lower end of the pyramids, these fibers sweep dorsolaterally. Very, very important word. They sweep dorsolaterally across the midline. How much will decussate? 70%. And finally, where do they reach? They reach the lateral white column. What do they form? They form lateral corticospinal tract. Okay, while doing so, they dissect or they separate the anterior horns from rest of the gray matter. How much fibers remain undecussated? 30%, and they continue as anterior white column. This is the most important part, and the section itself is called as section at the level of pyramidal decussation. So other tracts I have already mentioned. So just go through this. Fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, spinal tract of trigeminal nerve. Where are they seen? Posterior white column. Lateral white column, lateral corticospinal tract after decussation, then spinothalamic lateral, anterior and posterior spinocerebellar tracts, and reticular formation. Where are they seen? Lateral white column. Anterior white column, what do you see? Descending pyramidal tract fibers. After decussation, the 30% continue as anterior corticospinal tract. So this completes section at the level of pyramidal decussation. Now, let us go into cerebrum. Just I'll have a 1 minute break and then we'll continue for cerebrum. Is that okay for all of you? If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Any doubts? Amisha, doubts on anything they have raised?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Shall we proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Right, cerebrum. So cerebrum is the thing which differentiates human being from rest of the lower animals. It is an extensive development of cerebrum that gives human his identity of intellect. Without this gyron, we are dominating the nature because of this extensive cerebrum that we have and blessed by God for us, right? We'll go into the cerebrum topic. So in brief about the most important question in the cerebrum is superolateral surface of cerebrum and its functional areas. Before going into the superolateral surface, just superficially let me complete the external features of cerebrum. The cerebrum has 3 poles: frontal pole, occipital pole, temporal pole. These are the 3 poles. The 3 surfaces here you are able to see the superolateral surface. The other side, that side you have the medial surface, and below this is the inferior surface, including this one. This is orbital and this is tentorial surface. So 3 surfaces superolateral. Opposite, the surface with which it faces the opposite hemisphere is the medial surface. This is the orbital and tentorial parts of the inferior surface. Inferior surface is irregular. Okay. The borders which you are seeing here are, this is inferolateral border and this is superomedial border. When you see the medial surface, we see the inferomedial border. Here inferolateral border and this is superomedial border. The inferomedial border you can appreciate on the medial surface. Here it is written 6 lobes. 4 lobes are grossly seen. This is frontal lobe, this is parietal lobe, this is occipital lobe, and this is temporal lobe. In this lateral sulcus, where I am putting my cursor, here there is a submerged lobe called insular lobe, and there is a small lobe concerned with memory, sexual behavior and all. That is limbic lobe, which is present close to the inferomedial border. Inferomedial border. Hippocampus, main part of the limbic system. So that lobe is called as limbic lobe. Insular lobe is a submerged lobe in the lateral sulcus. And the other lobe which we see on the medial surface close to the inferomedial border is the hippocampus. So this is the brief introduction. Then here, if you see this image, you are not able to differentiate frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital. So those are lines which are mentioned in the textbooks, how you have to separate the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. That we are going to learn. As I told, this is the supromedial border. This is inferolateral border. Here, you observe this is the inferomedial border. This is inferomedial border. In this inferomedial border, again, there are divisions. This is medial orbital border. Here I am focusing now. This is called as hippocampal border. At this place, you have the limbic lobe. you are able to see something here, dentate gyrus, hippocampus. This is the limbic lobe. Okay, so this border which you are seeing till here, this border is medial border, which is inferomedial. This medial occipital border, this is hippocampal border and medial orbital border. And this upper border, this is the superomedial border. Both are same. This border and this border are same. Okay. Excuse me. So how do you divide the cerebrum into 4 lobes? This is a brief thing. On the medial surface, first observe the medial surface. Here, this part is called splenium of corpus callosum, as all of you know. From the splenium of corpus callosum, there extends downwards a sulcus called calcarine sulcus. Down. This is calcarine sulcus. The sulcus which extends from the middle of the calcarine sulcus upwards, this is called parieto-occipital sulcus. These calcarine and parieto-occipital sulcus are mainly seen on the medial surface, but they extend slightly onto the superolateral surface from medial side. If you observe here, this is the post-calcarine sulcus. Major part is on the medial surface, a small part extends towards the superolateral surface. Similarly, here is the parieto-occipital sulcus which is extending from the medial surface towards the superolateral surface. There is a small depression on the inferolateral border in front of the occipital pole called pre-occipital notch. So an imaginary line, this is the first imaginary line that is connecting the parieto-occipital sulcus small part with the pre-occipital notch. This imaginary line, if drawn, it separates the occipital lobe from rest of the cerebrum. So this is the first imaginary line. Next, there is one important sulcus on the superolateral surface which is extending slightly behind the midline, middle of the supromedial border, and it is obtuse in nature. This largest sulcus, obliquely placed sulcus, is called as central sulcus. This is the second. First I have drawn, or we have drawn, parieto-occipital sulcus, now central sulcus. And the third sulcus here is lateral sulcus. The lateral sulcus, this ramus, it is called as posterior ramus of lateral sulcus because it has other 2 small rami called anterior and ascending rami. This is the longest ramus of the lateral sulcus called as posterior ramus. So, after drawing this posterior ramus of lateral sulcus, if you join by an imaginary line, second imaginary line, from the lower end of central sulcus to this lateral sulcus, the remaining 3 lobes get separated. The 3 lobes here are, in front of central sulcus is frontal lobe, behind central sulcus is parietal lobe, below the lateral sulcus is temporal lobe. If you join this lateral sulcus to this first imaginary line, this lobe will be separated. So I think you understood how the lobes are separated. What are the 3 sulci needed for the division of these lobes? Parieto-occipital sulcus, central sulcus, posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. Divide this cerebrum into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. Now, after understanding the lobes, here you are able to clearly see the lobes and their differentiating colors: pink, green, yellow, and violet. So this is frontal, this is parietal, this is occipital, and temporal. Also, you are able to see the imaginary line 1, and from the lateral sulcus to the imaginary line, this is another thing, and join the central sulcus to the lateral sulcus. Thus, we have the 4 lobes. Now, we are going to divide them through gyri and sulci into different parts. It is very simple if you follow the first thing. So, a sulcus present in front of the central sulcus is called as pre-central sulcus. In front is called pre-central sulcus. Okay. So the gyrus in front, gyrus is an elevated area, sulcus is a depressed area. Why the gyri and sulci are present in cerebrum? It's the first basic question. The gyri and sulci increase the surface area of the cerebral cortex so that more number of neurons can be accommodated. Okay. That is the reason why the human brain is called gyrencephalic. It is gyrated. That means elevations and depressions. Whereas if there are no elevations and depressions, if it is smooth, such type of brain is called lissencephalic brain. Our human brain is gyrencephalic, right? So the gyrus present in front of the central sulcus is called precentral gyrus. The sulcus here is precentral sulcus. The rest of the frontal lobe is divided into three gyri, superior, middle and inferior frontal gyri by two sulci, superior frontal sulcus and inferior frontal sulcus. Is that clear? So how many gyri we got? One precentral gyrus, three gyri, superior, middle and inferior frontal gyri. Then the inferior frontal gyrus is again divided into small gyri A, B, C by the extensions from lateral sulcus. I told you the lateral sulcus has an anterior extension and upper extension called ascending. This is anterior horizontal anterior and ascending is simple to understand. This is anterior ramus and this is ascending ramus. And this one long one is posterior ramus of lateral sulcus. So because of this anterior and ascending rami of lateral sulcus, the inferior frontal gyrus is divided into three parts. A, pars orbitalis, close to the orbits. Shape gives the name pars triangularis. And C is called pars opercularis because operculum means lid. What is it covering? It is covering the insular lobe. Hence it is called as pars opercularis. So the inferior frontal gyrus has again three small lobes, pars orbitalis, pars triangularis and pars opercularis. Right? Then, so this is about the gyri sulci of the frontal lobe. Okay? Shall I proceed? Now let us discuss the gyri sulci of the parietal lobe. The sulcus present behind the central sulcus is called post-central sulcus. In between the central sulcus and the post-central sulcus, we have post-central gyrus. This is post-central gyrus. Here, the rest of the parietal lobe is divided into two lobules, superior lobule and inferior lobule by a sulcus, IPL. IPL word you can remember. The expansion is intraparietal sulcus. Intraparietal sulcus divides, IPS, intraparietal sulcus divides this parietal lobe into SPL, superior parietal lobule, IPL, inferior parietal lobule. Clear? Right. Again, just like here, the inferior parietal lobule has two more additional gyri. What are they? How are they formed? These gyri are formed because of the upturned ends of the lateral sulcus and superior temporal sulcus. The gyrus that covers the upturned end of lateral sulcus is called supramarginal gyrus, and the gyrus that covers the upturned end of superior temporal sulcus is called angular gyrus. Okay? So, postcentral gyrus, postcentral sulcus, intraparietal sulcus, superior parietal lobule, inferior parietal lobule, supramarginal gyrus, angular gyrus. So these are the gyri of the parietal lobe. Now let us go to the temporal lobe. It is very, very simple. Superior temporal sulcus and inferior temporal sulcus divide the temporal lobe into superior, middle and inferior temporal gyri. Two sulci, three gyri. That's all about the temporal lobe. Then come to the occipital lobe, where you are able to see the posterior part or last part of the calcarine sulcus, which is mainly seen on the medial surface. So it's called postcalcarine sulcus. It is surrounded by a semi-lunar shaped sulcus called lunate sulcus. And one more sulcus is there on the superolateral surface of occipital lobe called lateral occipital sulcus. So these are the sulci gyri of the superolateral surface. Yes? Is that clear? So once, if we understand the sulci gyri and their disposition in the cerebral cortex superolateral surface, we can move to the functional areas. So the functional areas or the cerebral cortex, cortical areas have three types of function. Some areas do motor function and many areas do sensory function. Receptive areas, receiving areas are called sensory areas. Projecting areas are called motor areas. And associative areas, try to establish the connection between different areas. For your understanding, it is better to remember motor areas and sensory areas. It is simple. Okay. Further simplification, the frontal lobe consists of motor areas. Only frontal lobe consists of motor areas. Remaining three lobes, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe, all are sensory areas only. All have sensory areas only. The parietal lobe sensory areas are concerned with the skin, touch sensation. The visual areas, that means visual perception, is received by the occipital lobe areas. Auditory information is received by the temporal lobe. Is that clear? Touch sensation received by the parietal lobe, visual sensation received by occipital lobe, and auditory sensation is received by temporal lobe. The motor information is given to entire body, the head and neck and rest of the body, by the cerebral cortex only. Okay? Right. So as I have told you just now, frontal lobe is for motor control and also production of speech. Talking is also motor activity because muscles of mastication, muscles of tongue, muscles of pharynx and larynx, all of them will be moving. Moving means motor activity. So motor speech is also under the control of frontal lobe. Anything motor, movement of the muscle is frontal lobe. Perception of the touch, skin, body orientation, all this by parietal lobe. Visual is by occipital lobe. Temporal is for auditory processing, language, speech, and also temporal lobe has additional function of memory, information, everything. Hippocampus, limbic system is concerned with that. So now the functional areas. So I'll be telling in simple manner about the functional areas of the cerebral cortex. So I told you motor areas in the frontal lobe, sensory areas, touch sensory areas in the parietal lobe. Right? First, let us finish the motor areas. Precentral gyrus. Central sulcus. This gyrus is called precentral gyrus. Area number 4 is the primary motor area, where the largest pyramidal cells of Bedge cells are present here. And this is the thing which contributes mainly for the corticospinal tract. Is that clear? Corticospinal and corticonuclear. Corticonuclear is for cranial nerve nuclei for movement of the muscles related to head and neck. Corticospinal is for lower motor neurons of the spinal cord to move the body. So, major part of the corticospinal and corticonuclear fibers take origin from the primary motor area, area number 4. Then premotor area. Where is this located? Describe the location means posterior part of superior, middle and inferior frontal gyrus. The premotor area is present in the posterior part of superior, middle and inferior frontal gyri. That is the location. It is wider in the upper part, narrow in the lower part. Description. This is premotor area concerned with coordination of the movements and skillful performance of the movements. Here motor activity begins and it is made coordinated or skillful by the premotor area. It is a place actually where the extrapyramidal fibers take origin. What are extrapyramidal? That means anything that is descending from above is motor. So cortico to spinal or nuclear is pyramidal, whereas cortico-rubral, cortico-striatal, like that. Cortico-vestibular, there are so many other tracts which are helping in smooth performance of the motor activity. They are called extrapyramidal tracts. So they begin. Cortico, we are using cortico-rubral. So that cortico is which cortical area? Premotor area number 6. This is like even numbers 4, 6, and in front of 6, in the posterior part of the middle frontal gyrus, we have frontal eye field, which has connections with the visual cortex, because we are saying eye field. So it is connected to the visual cortex association fibers, and it is concerned with scanning movements of the eye. Fast moving objects, our eyes will be scanning. So that is concerned with the that is the action of the frontal eye field. Inferior frontal gyrus. This is superior, middle and inferior. This is only middle and this is inferior frontal gyrus. As you all know by this time, this is pars orbitalis, this is pars triangularis and pars opercularis. Area number 44 and 45. Pars triangularis and pars opercularis. Motor speech area or Broca's area is present. So this is concerned with production of speech, which is a motor activity. 45 and 44 is called Broca's area or motor speech area, concerned with production of speech. So these are the motor areas. So how many motor areas are there? 4, 6, 8, 45 and 44. That's all. Now come to the sensory tactile speech areas, touch related, sensation related speech areas. You can start with 3 to remember well. This is 4, so start with 3. 3, 1, 2, you can remember like that. 3, 1, 2 is the area concerned with primary somatosensory area, concerned with perception of the touch. That means you feel that something is touching you. That is primary somatosensory area. 5 and 7 are called sensory association areas. What is this association? Understanding the touch, interpreting the touch, recognizing the touch. So with what is the touch sensation that you are getting? That means, is the touch related to book, blunt object, sharp object? You can recollect by just touch with the touch, isn't it? So interpretation of the touch, identification of the touch, all these things, memorizing the touch, all these things are the functions of some sensory association areas, that is 5 and 7. Okay. Area number 312 is primary somatosensory area and 5 and 7 are called sensory association areas. 3, 5, 7. You can remember like that. 3, 1, 2, 5 and 7. Then in the inferior parietal lobule, we have 40 and 39. This is called sensory speech area. Here you had the motor speech area. Here we have the sensory speech area, otherwise called Wernicke's area. It is called as Wernicke's area also. It is also called as tactile speech area. It is also called as tactile speech area. Okay. So 40 and 39 are called sensory speech areas or tactile speech area. Then these are the, so 312 primary sensory area, 5, 7 sensory association areas, and 40 and 39 are called sensory speech area or Wernicke's area. So this completes the functional lobes of the parietal lobe. Then about the occipital lobe, around the postcalcarine sulcus, the postcalcarine sulcus posterior part or the last part is surrounded by, that means the visual cortex is also seen on the medial surface. It is surrounded by primary visual area. That means perception of vision. That's all. You are able to see. Interpretation of the vision, understanding the vision, memorizing the vision, recollecting what you have seen. All these are functions of visual association areas. 18 and 19. 17 is just seeing. You are able to see or not. That seeing, what you are seeing, what kind of object is that memorizing the vision, understanding the vision is the function of visual association areas. 18 and 19. Then the temporal lobe. This is superior temporal gyrus. Okay. The superior temporal gyrus upper surface, it's not the lateral surface, superior surface of superior temporal gyrus has primary auditory area, area number 41 and 42. So in this region, you can observe 39, 40, 41, 42. You don't have 43. Directly you go to 44 and 45. 39, 40 is here. Here you have the 41, 42, then 44, 45. They are present in this region. Their numbers you can remember like that. So primary auditory area is otherwise called Heschel's gyrus. It is present on the superior surface of superior temporal gyrus. Whereas on the lateral surface, superolateral surface, this surface just below or adjoining the primary auditory area, auditory association area, it is area number 22. So what is the role of primary auditory area? Listening the sound, hearing something is primary auditory area. Interpretation of the sound, understanding of the sound and memorizing the sound. When you hear the same sound again, you can identify what sound it is, where from it is coming, all these things. So interpretation of the sound, understanding the sound and memorizing the sound. These are the functions of area number 22. So this is about functional areas. One more important point before leaving the topic. There is two representations. This you have covered in physiology, if I am not wrong. They are called sensory homunculus and motor homunculus. It is very, very important both anatomically and physiologically. What is the meaning of the word homunculus? Homunculus means representation of the human body is called as homunculus. In the motor area, area number 4, main motor area number 4, the body is represented in this manner, inverted manner. At the lower end, close to the lateral sulcus, the face, tongue, pharynx, larynx have the maximum representation, followed by hand, and this is the arm, and this is trunk, and this is thigh part of the leg. Thigh will be there on the supralateral surface, leg and foot will be on the medial surface, even the perineum is also on the medial surface. Once again, the face, upper limb, trunk and thigh of the lower limb will be on the supralateral surface. The leg, foot and perineum are on the medial surface. And the representation, if you see, the areas which perform more skillful and motor activities have wide representation on the gyrus, whereas the areas which have less skillful movement are represented less on the motor cortex. This is the most important point. Here you should also understand that the perineum, leg and foot are on the medial surface. So if there is reduced blood supply to this region, so these areas are affected, but these will remain unaffected because they are represented on the medial side. Okay. The hand, which is performing maximum skillful movements, see the representation, hand and thumb. The tongue, which moves extensively, skillfully, is also given big representation. So this is the representation area depends upon the skillful motor activity, but not on the bulk of the muscle. If you remember, the largest bulky muscles are there in the lower limb, in the thigh. But look at the representation and look at this representation. So that is the understanding you should get in the motor cortex. Look at the sensory cortex. Here, the receptive area, the more sensory receptors, wherever they are, whatever we want to feel, we feel with the help of the hand, isn't it? And with the foot. And highly sensory areas which are having more receptors are represented more when compared to the areas, other areas, I mean, okay, the tongue, which is highly sensitive, taste sensation, then touch, then temperature, everything. Face is very sensitive. The more number of sensory receptors, the more representation. Less receptors, less representation. With the foot, we feel everything. So foot is comparatively large when compared to other part of the upper limb. But the representation is same. The face, upper limb, trunk and thigh regions are there on the supralateral surface. Leg and foot and perineum are on the medial surface. So this is about sensory and motor homunculus. Because for undergraduates, it is the supralateral surface that is more important. I am not going to bore you by telling the medial surface and inferior surface. This is the essay question for you. So learn it well. So just to show you, I have projected here, but this is not very important for you. Here you have only one thing that you need to remember, paracentral lobule. What is paracentral lobule? The central sulcus extends on to the supra, just like this is calcarine sulcus, this has extended to supralateral. This is calcarine and this is parieto-occipital sulcus, which have extended to the supralateral supralateral surface, as I have mentioned. In the same way, the major sulcus of the supralateral surface is central sulcus, which extends on to the medial surface. So around this central sulcus, this lobule is called paracentral lobule. Para means by the side of the central sulcus, the lobule is called paracentral lobule. This paracentral lobule also has extension of the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. So here the perineum, leg and foot are represented. And this part is called as prefrontal gyrus, medial frontal gyrus, which is concerned with emotional, social, judgmental behavior of human beings. So these two things are important. Any lesion in this area, the person will suffer with lack of social behavior. Sometimes we can call them antisocial also. So this gyrus is having the functional area that is concerned with judgment, social behavior mainly. And this is paracentral lobule, which is the extension or which is the extension of precentral gyrus and postcentral gyrus around the medial part of central sulcus, right? This is the prefrontal area or prefrontal gyrus. The same areas we see here also 4 main motor, 6 premotor, 8 frontal eye field, and this 9, 10, 11 is the prefrontal area. Area number 312 is here. I told you that in the medial surface, again around the, what is the sulcus? Calcarine sulcus. Area number 17. Around that is 18. Around that is 19. Hence, this sulcus, calcarine sulcus, is also called axial sulcus. That means it is forming the axis for the visual cortex, either main visual area or visual association areas. So, depending upon the arrangement of the functional areas and the gray matter, the sulci will be labeled or named as different names. So, here this is calcarine sulcus is called as axial sulcus. So, we'll close these functional areas by telling about the speech. The motor speech, that means we are talking because of the normal function of the motor speech area, Broca's area 44 and 45. Where is the speech area located? For right-handed persons, the left hemisphere is called dominant hemisphere and it is the speaking brain. The brain which receives the information and the brain which speaks is the left hemisphere, that is dominant hemisphere. In the dominant hemisphere, inferior frontal gyrus, Broca's area is located and it is connected to the sensory speech area called Wernicke's area, which in different textbooks they give in different way. But to produce speech, we need an integration between auditory, visual and tactile 3 sensations. All these 3 has to be integrated. So, around this posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, the part of the brain that is present is the receptive brain. Receptive brain. This area is called as Wernicke's area. Some say it is 40 and 39 is Wernicke's area. Some textbooks say it is 22. But both are correct. From 22 to 40 and 39, this area can be called as Wernicke's area. And the white matter fibers that connect the motor speech area with the sensory speech area is called arcuate fasciculus. So, any lesion in this area or decreased blood supply in this area, the patient can receive information and can understand well because his receptive areas are normal. But whatever he understands, that information is conveyed through this arcuate fasciculus to the motor area. But because this area is lacking blood supply, he cannot speak. Or if this area is affected, he cannot speak, though he can understand everything. He cannot speak. If his hand part in the precentral gyrus is intact, he may write and show, but he cannot speak. If this area is also affected, he even can't write. Is that clear? Is that clear, all of you? For example, another thing, if this area is intact, and this area is problematic, the blood supply to this area is lost. Whatever we speak to them, they cannot understand. But with their visual, something we are speaking that they will understand, the main primary auditory area is intact, so they will be listening some sound, but they cannot understand what we are speaking. So they will respond by talking, but it will not have any meaning. Meaningless fluent speech, sensory aphasia. Scanty words, Broca's aphasia or motor aphasia. Words are not coming. Some sounds they make, but the words. So, scanty speech, motor aphasia. Fluent speech, sensory aphasia. Is that clear? Is that clear? If arcuate fasciculus is lost, no connection between both, then it is called conduction aphasia. It is called conduction. Neither the received information is going to the talking area, nor this is functioning. Both are not coordinated, so it is called conduction aphasia. Expressive aphasia, receptive aphasia, and conduction aphasia. These are the 3 types of speech defects due to reduced blood supply to the motor and sensory areas. Is that clear? This is related to middle cerebral artery superior division, because the branches will be going, the middle cerebral artery runs here, the superior branches will be going here, inferior branches here. So superior division of middle cerebral artery, inferior division of middle cerebral artery. Both you have to remember left middle cerebral artery because left hemisphere is the dominant hemisphere. So this is about functional areas and then aphasia. Let me take 1 minute break and then we'll continue with blood supply of the brain. If you have any doubts, you can ask.
Ma'am, they have asked in chat box one question, ma'am. Area number 22 is also known as Wernicke's area.
Wernicke's area, you should not think as a single area. Actually, 39, 40 and 22 all come under Wernicke's area in a broad sense actually. 22 is only auditory sensory area. That means if I ask a question, you will listen and then answer. Is that clear? So with the help of 22, you can understand my words, isn't it? If 41, 42 is just sound hearing, but with the help of 22, you are able to interpret whatever words and understand whatever words I have spoken. So with that input, you are able to talk. So that is the first speech area. Am I clear? That is the first sensory speech area. So 22 is the main sensory speech area, but we cannot deny 39 and 40 also. Because for example, if I don't talk, just in a, comic way I'm telling, if I touch you and pinch you tightly, okay, then what will you say? Why are you pinching? So I have given the response to your skin, but you have answered something through your mouth. Okay, so tactile perception also results in speech, isn't it? Am I clear? So 39, 40 also can be included in Wernicke's or sensory speech area. Am I clear? But in your textbook, whatever they have given, you just follow the textbook and do it. Commonly, speech means oral only. That means listening the question and answering. So for that understanding purpose, 22 is Wernicke's area is most appropriate at your understanding at your level. Hope I have answered your question. If still anything is there doubt, you can ask. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Shall we proceed with the blood supply of brain?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So actually it appears to be a cumbersome topic, but it is simple if we go in a systematic manner. So brain is supplied by what? Brain is supplied by circle of Willis. Circle of Willis is a hexagonal structure which is present in the base of the brain, below the brain, and from there the vessels will be radiating in 3 directions. Anterior cerebral towards the midline, just above the corpus callosum. The middle cerebral artery will be going laterally along the lateral sulcus to the middle of the brain. And the posterior cerebral artery will be radiating posteriorly. So 3 cerebral arteries supply the brain: anterior cerebral, middle cerebral, and posterior cerebral. What is the source? Circle of Willis. So how is the circle of Willis formed? The circle of Willis is formed again by 2 arteries. They are internal carotid artery and vertebral artery. Is that clear? So source of formation of circle of Willis is internal carotid and vertebral artery. They unite to form dash circle of Willis. And from the circle of Willis, what are the 3 major arteries that are arising and supplying the brain? Anterior, middle, and posterior cerebral arteries. So these are the 2 vertebral arteries, okay, which unite to form basilar artery, and this basilar artery divides into 2 posterior cerebral arteries. The internal carotid artery gives rise to middle cerebral artery going towards the supralateral surface of brain like this, anterior cerebral arteries like this. So middle cerebral and anterior cerebral are branches of internal carotid artery. So this half of the hexagon and these two posterior cerebral arteries have to be connected, form a circle. So that connection is posterior communicating artery. The two anterior right about the blood supply of brain. So first heading will be arterial supply. The arterial supply of the brain is by circle of Willis. Second point, formation of circle of Willis is by internal carotid and vertebral system. Third point. Okay. The third point is description of circle of Willis boundaries. Look at this circle of Willis. The circle of Willis is anteriorly having anterior communicating artery. Anterolaterally having anterior cerebral artery. Laterally having internal carotid artery. Posterolaterally having posterior communicating artery. Posteriorly having posterior cerebral artery. Okay, these are the boundaries. You can call it boundaries or description of circle of Willis. So I have described the circle of Willis formation, then description, formation and description of circle of Willis. Then if you see this diagram, you are also able to see these are the main arteries that you are anyhow seeing. These are the main. In addition, you are able to see some small projections from these. What are these arteries? These arteries are central arteries. So now I have uttered a new term, central arteries. What does it mean? The brain consists of cerebral cortex on the superficial aspect and a core called white matter within it. Brain is covered on the top by cerebral cortex or gray matter, and in the core major part is white matter. Within the white matter, there are masses of gray matter like basal nuclei, thalamus and hypothalamus. So to supply these intracerebral gray matter, within the white matter of the cerebrum, some gray matter are there. So they will be supplied by these small branches called central branches of circle of Willis. So cerebral cortex is supplied by these branches, that is anterior cerebral, middle cerebral, posterior cerebral. So they are called cerebral cortex branches, so cortical branches. The small branches which you are seeing are called central branches, which supply the intracerebral nuclei. Then there are two other names called choroidal arteries. Here you have anterior choroidal artery. So another posterior choroidal artery will also be there. So the posterior choroidal and anterior choroidal, here you have the posterior choroidal artery. So anterior choroidal is direct branch of internal carotid artery and posterior choroidal is a branch of posterior cerebral artery. So these choroidal arteries form choroid plexus in close relation to the ventricles and they are responsible for formation of the CSF. So totally, the circle of Willis has three types of branches. Cortical branches supply the functional areas of the brain. Central branches supply the intracerebral nuclei. Choroidal branches form choroid plexus and are responsible for production of the CSF. So I have told you, yes, I have told you about the distribution of circle of Willis. Right? So these are the branches. So this is anterior cerebral artery close to the midline. Here you have the middle cerebral artery and here you have the posterior cerebral artery. Right. I told you that there will be, here these are the nuclei. This is a nucleus, intracerebral nucleus. And these are central branches. Central branches of the, yes, which I have mentioned just now. Middle cerebral artery. Right. Like this. Here a word you are able to see, lenticulostriate. If you remember, the basal nuclei are given another name called striatum, corpus striatum. Lentiform nucleus is there here. So the corpus striatum and the lentiform nucleus are supplied by, these are basal nuclei. They are supplied by these lenticulostriate arteries. So now, just what are the headings we have completed till now. The blood supply of brain is by circle of Willis. How is it formed? Okay. Then after formation, description of circle of Willis. Anterolateral, anterior, lateral, posterolateral. Like that we have described. Then I have told different types of branches of circle of Willis. Cortical, central and choroidal. Just write the names and what does it do. Now I am going to describe the blood supply of the supralateral surface because the supralateral surface functional areas are more plenty because all the body is represented on the supralateral surface itself and we have described in detail before. So the blood supply of the supralateral surface is important. Hence, I have projected like this. The entire cerebrum also I will be telling in this slide itself. So the middle cerebral artery runs in the posterior ramus of lateral sulcus. I think you remember here, this is lateral sulcus. So this middle cerebral artery gives rise to branches called Rolandic artery means Rolandic sulcus, central sulcus artery. Pre-Rolandic artery, pre-central. Rolandic is a name given to central sulcus. So Rolandic artery, pre-Rolandic artery, post-Rolandic artery, parietal arteries, temporal arteries, anterior, posterior, orbitofrontal artery. These are the branches of middle cerebral artery which supply major part of the supralateral surface except the lower limb area. You can see that the anterior cerebral artery branches are creeping from medial side to the supralateral surface. That means here you should remember the medial surface has paracentral lobule, perineum and leg area. In addition, it also supplies the thigh area also. So nearer to the supromedial border, the cerebral cortex, the medial surface and the upper part of the supralateral surface are supplied by the anterior cerebral artery. Major part of the supralateral surface adjoining the lateral sulcus supplied by middle cerebral artery. This is inferolateral border and this is occipital lobe and pole. They are supplied by posterior cerebral artery. This is posterior cerebral artery. So nearer to upper border, anterior cerebral artery. Major part of the surface, middle cerebral artery. Nearer to lower border and posterior pole, posterior cerebral artery. So three important words all of you remember. Major part of the body is represented here. So any injury or any clot or thrombus in the middle cerebral artery, hemiparesis or hemiplegia of the opposite half of the body, loss of sensation of the opposite half of the body, because motor cortex and sensory cortex, main premotor area, all are affected. Auditory area is also affected. Auditory function also affected. Vernix area affected, motor area affected. So these are the areas supplied by the middle cerebral artery. Perineum, lower limb, mainly. Micturition center, defecation center are present in the paracentral lobule. Those will be affected if there is lesion in the anterior cerebral artery. Complete vision is controlled by the posterior cerebral artery. Blood supply to the visual area is by posterior cerebral artery. This is the idea that you have to get. So the same thing in a different view. Major part of supralateral surface, middle cerebral artery. Medial surface, anterior cerebral, inferior and posterior pole, posterior cerebral, adjoining the stem of the lateral sulcus. This is the middle cerebral artery. The same thing I am showing here again. Medial surface, anterior cerebral, posterior pole and inferior surface, posterior cerebral. This is related to middle. In the middle is the middle cerebral artery. This is the stem of the lateral sulcus. This goes to the lateral surface. Middle cerebral, close to the midline, medial surface, anterior cerebral, inferior surface, posterior cerebral. Nearer to the midline is always anterior cerebral, inferior surface and posterior by posterior cerebral. Adjoining the lateral sulcus, this is stem of lateral sulcus. It is middle cerebral. So I have finished arterial supply. You just mention which part of the brain is supplied by the which artery. That is enough for you. Okay. So circle of Willis is the major arterial supply. How does it form? Then what is its description? How the arteries are arranged? What types of branches are there? How do they supply the brain? And then which cerebral artery is supplying which part of the brain? Is what you have to write for arterial supply. Then venous drainage. Only these two diagrams are there. venous drainage is beyond your level, they will be expecting only arterial supply, but still for completion's sake, to make the task simple, just I am telling. Remember the code, arterial supply is by anterior cerebral, middle cerebral, posterior cerebral. Whereas venous drainage is superior cerebral veins and inferior cerebral veins. Is that clear? Superior, middle and inferior cerebral vein. The superior cerebral veins are many in number. They will be running upwards and they open into superior sagittal sinus. The middle cerebral vein drains by multiple veins into this middle cerebral vein, but this is the superficial middle cerebral vein because you are seeing superficially on the supralateral surface. All the veins drain into this superficial middle cerebral vein, which again there will be two communicating veins called superior anastomotic vein and inferior anastomotic vein. The superior will go to the superior sagittal sinus and the inferior will go to the transverse sinus. Okay. The transverse sinus is continuous. Right side with the right transverse sinus will be continuous with the sigmoid sinus, and then it continues as internal jugular vein. That means the venous return from the brain will be draining into the internal jugular vein downwards ultimately. And finally, the internal jugular vein will join the subclavian vein and then forms the brachiocephalic vein to open into superior vena cava. Okay, just for completion, I am saying all these things. The superior cerebral veins move upwards in an oblique manner and drain into superior cerebral. The veins which drain in the downward direction go to the middle cerebral vein. This middle cerebral vein has a direction this way and this way. This is medially and this is here. Downwards and medially and inferiorly, it drains into cavernous sinus, which is present in the cranial fossa, middle cranial fossa on either side of the body of the sphenoid. This is the direction in which it opens into cavernous sinus. In this direction, it has communication through superior anastomotic vein and inferior anastomotic vein, superior to the superior sagittal sinus and inferior to the transverse sinus. Here, you are able to see this is the great cerebral vein. The great cerebral vein is formed from the great cerebral vein is formed from transverse sinus. Here you are seeing this is right transverse sinus and the straight sinus is continuous with left transverse sinus, and then again same thing, transverse left sigmoid, left internal jugular vein. So the central part of the brain is the right side. Am I clear? Right. The inferior surface of the brain, the superficial cortex of the inferior surface of the brain inferior surface is in contact with the skull, isn't it? In the skull, on either side of the body of sphenoid, you have cavernous sinus. So the inferior cerebral veins directly open into cavernous sinus. This is all what you need. This much is enough. The superolateral surface, you have superior cerebral vein, middle cerebral vein. Okay? They drain into superior sagittal sinus or right transverse sinus. The interior of the brain, from the interior of the brain and the base of brain, certain veins will join to form straight sinus and they drain into left transverse sinus. And at the end, the inferior surface of the brain directly opens into cavernous sinus. Okay? I also shown this is the middle cerebral vein. This is lateral sulcus. So the middle cerebral vein also opens into cavernous sinus inferiorly. It goes down and opens here. Posteriorly, superiorly and inferiorly. This is about the venous drainage. Okay. So this completes what? The blood supply of the brain, arterial supply and venous drainage. The same thing in this way. These are the internal cerebral veins. As I was mentioning, they come out as great cerebral vein. This is enough for you at this level. So have a happy learning. Regarding the clinical aspect, just only middle cerebral artery is the artery which is prone for hemorrhage or infarction. So Charcot's artery of cerebral hemorrhage is one artery which is a branch of middle cerebral artery. So any hemorrhage or infarction in the branches of middle cerebral artery, which area is affected now you only can tell. The middle cerebral artery mainly affects the motor cortex, sensory cortex, or Broca's area. All those things are there. Okay. And if you go inside the brain, internal capsule is there. So the internal capsule, which part will be affected? Genu will be affected because the blood supply of internal capsule, the middle cerebral artery supplies genu and posterior limb. So in the genu and posterior limb, corticonuclear and corticospinal fibers are there. So if they are affected, it results in hemiplegia of the opposite side and loss of sensations of the opposite half of the body. Paralysis means hemiplegia. So if you remember that middle cerebral artery hemorrhage or thrombosis results in decreased blood supply to the motor and sensory cortex, resulting in hemiplegia of the opposite half of the body and loss of sensations of opposite half of body. That is enough for you. Okay. So this completes blood supply of the brain. So thank you very much and then enjoy your learning.
Thank you, madam. Let's conclude the session with the Shanti Mantram. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, na kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Parimala Madam for an insightful and enriching session. Thank you, Madam, for your valuable time and guidance. We also thank all the participants for your presence and active participation. The upcoming session is tomorrow, and tomorrow onwards, we are going to start biochemistry sessions. Tomorrow's faculty is Dr. Kiranmay Madam, Professor of Biochemistry in SWIMS. Tomorrow's topic is carbohydrates. The subtopics are digestion, absorption, transport of carbohydrates, glycolysis, and TCA cycle. We look forward to your active participation in the upcoming sessions of the 15-day rapid revision series. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Have a happy learning and prepare well for your final exams, upcoming final exams. All the best for you. I wish you all pass in your exams with good percentages. Okay. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.